Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the GoT Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm your host for this evening, Tyler Schatz, Servant of the Realm. Joining me today is the one Gary Delaney.
The Great Bear. Delaney.
And with us is also Mr. Nick Castillo.
Love is the death of duty.
Love is the death of
You
duty.
said dude.
Alright, so a slight change of pace for this episode of the podcast. We will only be covering one episode of Game of Thrones this time because it is the penultimate episode of Season 1, Episode 9, titled Baylor.
Ultimate.
Penultimate, yes. Right before the ultimate final episode of the season. So, we get kind of started off here with just right away we get into with Ned. It's basically just a scene of Ned in the dungeon and Varys comes down to visit him again. They have another great conversation of kind of like, are you prepared for this? Is there anything more you could do? Is there anything more you want to do? And Ned kind of, like my part that I wanted to kind of talk about here was just Ned turns to Varys basically and says, truthfully, straight up, no lies, no deception, tell me, who do you serve? And Varys says, he says he serves the realm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like and then they have kind of like this conversation with like a difference of opinion of like, Varys says, how he's an actor, he's trained, he's good with lies and deception, whereas Ned was basically raised by soldiers, so he understands that basically he's kind of accepted, he's already ready to give his life away to death. But then also Varys kind of reminds him, I understand, you may not be concerned for yourself anymore, basically, but what about your daughters?
Mm-hmm.
I think the line is something like, Ned says, you grew up with actors. Like, I grew up with soldiers. I've been ready to die learned how to die years ago.
Right.
Yep, exactly. I did want to call out one point here, though, and we probably don't completely have an answer for it right now. But so Varys constantly says, he wants peace, he wants to serve the realm, and, the question is, and knowing, too, that he met with Ilio underneath the King's Landing there early in this season here, Varys says he wants to serve the realm. Like, does he really mean he wants to serve the realm, the common people as it is, or does he want to serve the area and kind of keep it quiet and docile until the Targaryen can rise in the east again?
Ooh, interesting. I don't believe... I'll let Gary ponder on that for a little. He can chew on that thought for a moment. See what I did there? I do think that he is honestly looking for peace. Just kind of, I'll build up and then come back to this thought. The thought I saw in a lot of the thread through a lot of this episode is the dichotomy of how people are talking about one thing, but then ultimately we find out that the opposite is what has come to fruition. Like in this episode, in this transition here, Varys is talking about how he grew up with the thought that everyone has a part to play. He doesn't really focus so much on the acting part of it, that everyone has a part to play, everyone has a purpose. Whereas Ned kind of saw that interaction more so as he's focusing on the deception and you're not really what you say you are. So like you said, he asked him straight up, no lies, no deception. What is your purpose? And truthfully, Varys, I think, is honestly trying to serve the realm. I don't know, to be honest, like you said, Tyler, if he's actually trying to undermine the current ruling group, like you said, or just trying to keep the area peaceful until a Targaryen comes back. But I think just in general, he doesn't want bloodshed. Whoever rules can rule, but he doesn't want bloodshed. If that ruler turns out to be someone who is not a good person or not someone who's avoiding war and, violence and death, I think that's what he's going to try and undermine. I think he just wants the peace of it. He's got his, little spiders he keeps talking about, or people who are, the kids who are getting information for him, little secrets and things he hears.
His little birds, he calls them.
His little birds, thank you. He calls them little birds. But how he uses that network of things is definitely not to undermine people, but just to kind of keep stability. I think he's kind of neutral. Like if you think of, the Dungeons and Dragons, alignment or whatever, there's this definite thought that he's I'm getting shaking heads, that he's true neutral. Like, he's not evil because he does some things that people are kind of questioning, but he's not fully good either, where people think, what is he up to? He's just neutral, right down the middle of the road. And whatever will be balanced is what he's looking for. So when he says, I'm serving the realm, because he doesn't say, I'm serving the Lannisters, I'm serving the Baratheons. He says, I'm serving the realm. All right. Now that you've thought long and hard, Gary, you can interject.
You were saying that, what's the guy's name?
Varys.
Varys was maybe on the side of the Targaryens, but I would say he's definitely not, because Varys is the one who sent his little birds to kill the Targaryens, or to kill
Dany.
James. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
I think ultimately Varys just uses Illyrio as one more spy he has across the Narrow Sea, someone he keeps close, and we haven't really got a real long backstory on Illyrio. So it could just be Illyrio's out for himself too. Like, he helped these kids out when they're young, hoping that, maybe small investment now, big payoff later on.
Well, sure. I'm sure he takes care of the kids.
But everyone just playing their own game. Like, ultimately, they're just in it to, like, Illyrio's in it to make money. Viserys is in it to make the world a better place. But I think he ultimately is probably more loyal to Robert than he is to Daenerys.
Well, sure, because Robert had now that his rebellion was done, he had no great wars or no great follow-up or bloodshed against people necessarily. He just drank, and the realm faltered because of it, but there was no chaos in it. As far as with Illyrio, the realm is only going to be as strong as your neighbors allow it to be. If Illyrio says, well, the Targaryens are coming back, and I'm going to allow them to build up an army on the opposite side of the Narrow Sea and come and destroy the Westeros, that wouldn't be good either. So to that end, I think that's why he's working with Illyrio, to say, keep the Targaryens over there, kind of let them do whatever. But yeah, like you said, let me know what's up to them, and just another pawn in his chessboard.
Just one more person from across the Narrow Sea that can tell him when you have to brace for impact. But we can probably roll forward.
I was going to say one point to your thing there, Gary, though, is like he sent the assassins out to kill the Targaryens, Daenerys specifically, because he was kind of instructed to do so, as he kind of told Ned he's no great fighter or anything like that. He's not going to be winning any sword battles or anything like that. So if he's kind of commanded to do it to protect his own life, he will eventually do it there. Yeah, it might not kind of serve maybe the greater purpose that he was trying to make there, but if ultimately it's between him doing this and living or him not doing this and dying, pretty much he's going to obviously stick to living.
Did we find out or discern if Jorah is working for Varys? Is that who that contact is? Because we found out that Jorah was relaying information on Dany to Westeros, but was that through Varys? Or was that through Littlefinger or somebody else?
Nope, it was through Varys, because one of the little birds, the little children, basically shows up in the market there to talk to Jorah when he separates himself from Dany.
Gotcha.
Some reference to him being a little bird.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I was going to say, because that loop, King Robert was getting like almost instantaneous feedback. Like, we'd see an episode, a small segment with Dany, and then the next episode would be Robert at the council talking about, now she's pregnant. And it just seemed like that instantaneous feedback came so quickly. Yeah, if Varys didn't do what he was commanded to do, he would be killed. And then whatever plans he had or balance he was looking for would be for naught. Okay, side thought. You're good.
Yep. All right, so then we move over to Rob Stark, basically in his army kind of just standing at the twins.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a line from, I get his name wrong, confused. It's Umber, right? Big John Umber.
Yep.
The guy with the chains across his chest there. He makes like a quote there about the House Lord there of, expect nothing of Walter Frey and you'll never be surprised.
Correct.
And then you get kind of an introduction to Lord Frey, Walder Frey, because they need to negotiate. Rob's army needs to negotiate with him to basically get safe passing across the Twins, which is basically a bridge that crosses the river there, so that way they can. Is it get away from Tywin or the Lannister army, or is it kind of maybe move more towards Tywin's army?
To move closer to his army.
Closer.
Further south.
Because I'm guessing that's the best crossing.
It is the best
And
crossing.
He's got to move a large army. I think if he doesn't go through the twins, he has to probably circumnavigate. That's how I understood it.
Okay.
Correct. So the river there is called the Green Fork. I'm looking at a map here of the Riverlands, and the twins are kind of at the northern tip of the Riverlands, just south of the neck, which is the thinner part there where the north is. So all the Northmen have to come down through the neck, down into the Riverlands, where these two teams are kind of meeting. And yeah, the river runs more or less northwest to southeast. So it is kind of diagonal. But yeah, if you want to get into the Riverlands, you have to cross the Green Fork at some point. And that's kind of where the twins are at, is that big bridge. And yeah, it's a huge castle with enough river, because there's a quick shot there of them standing looking over at the river. It's fairly wide. There's no way you can ford it like the Oregon Trail. He would lose his team. The best way to do it is to definitely cross somewhere where there's a crossing, and that's probably why that's why the twins are there.
Reference to Oregon Trail.
You can't not reference the Oregon Trail, Gary. And so that's why the castle is there. It's the best cross, and probably, as they said, Lord Walder Frey or the Freys have had that crossing for 600 years, and they've never not been able to exact a toll.
Yeah. So the reason that we meet them is because Cat volunteers to go in there basically as a way to like put some kind of power behind the person who's talking to Walder Frey about trying to get the North Army across the river, but also too so that way Robb Stark basically doesn't get like taken captured by Walder Frey and then sold off to the Lannisters or something like that. It's kind of protecting the head focal point of your army there. So since this is our first introduction to the House Frey, Nick, could you provide us a little feedback on House Frey?
They're terrible people. There's really not too much in the book here actually about House Frey. They are not the book calls the people who rule that whole area Lord Paramount. Like there are other different houses or families in the north, but the Starks are the House Paramount. They're the king people in that area. The Freys are powerful as far as the Riverlands go, but they're not the rulers of the Riverlands. That's House Tully, as in Catelyn Tully, Catelyn Stark now. And so the book doesn't go into too much detail other than that they exist. They've had that area for many, many years, as the show references. But as far as the book says, it just kind of references right now that it's fallen to Lord Walder Frey, who is quick to temper and to take wives, is essentially, I think, how it's written here. I can't find the exact page, but it just references that, yeah, he finds young women who are brought to him that grow up in his area, and then he has more sons and more daughters, and then just takes another wife. I think in the show that he even makes a quick reference then when he's parlaying really quick with Catelyn Tully that this is like his third or fourth marriage. And you even see all of his sons that he has in his council chambers who are just like trying to talk to him as he's trying to talk to Catelyn.
Wife is 14, 15?
Oh, yeah, they say 15. He says, what's the line? He's just disgusting. He said, she's 15 and her honey is all mine. She's a delicate flower, 15 or something like that, and her honey's all mine.
Yep.
And he's clearly like, 60s something. Probably older.
I'd almost put him older than that, though, too. Yeah, but he's...
One thing, I guess, that the show doesn't explain, but probably not a spoiler moving forward, is in conversations where the Freys are having and interacting with other houses, they have some sort of game where it's like how many people in succession they are from being like the next to control the twins.
Oh, like all the sons and things? Interesting.
Like, yeah, there was some sort of game where in the book it talks about how, like, because he has so many children and so many wives, it just goes in, like, where in the line of succession all of these kids are.
Well, they're nipping at his heels. Like, he's like, I'm not dead yet.
One of them is a bastard, Another, I guess, item that I forgot to make a large note on was the deal. I don't know if we're quite to what the deal was, or if we want to circle back to that. I had some thoughts on the deal.
The deal doesn't come until later on in the episode that you're talking about.
I'll hold my note till then.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So-
just clearly he's a very old, crotchety, lewd individual, and you could tell Catelyn just rolls her eyes and tries to be proper with him, but clearly he does not deserve it.
Bites her tongue a lot, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so after that we jump up to the north there at the wall, Castle Black there, where Jon Snow receives Longclaw, the sword of House Mormont from Commander Mormont, there for basically saving his life. And Jon points out that it's a Valyrian steel, which is kind of interesting because that's the Mormont family sword. They've held it for I want to say 600 years, but that doesn't seem right. Or if it was 6 generations, but basically,
Something like that.
Jorah Mormont gave it to his son Jorah, but then Jorah dishonored the family. So the proper thing he did before he left Westeros there was actually give the sword back.
Mm-hmm.
And originally it had a bear pommel at the end of it, but Jorah had I'm guessing the people at Castle Black there forge a wolf's head pommel for it.
Very cool.
So was maybe a history, and I don't think it'll spoil anything, is that when did Lord Mormont go to Castle Black? Was that before or after his son was dishonored?
Before. I think he's been Lord Commander for some time. And then
That's why when his son was dishonored, the sword went with him to Castle Black, is because he was the last remaining heir.
No, backwards. The father is Lord Commander there. So then, since he went to Castle Black, he left the family heirloom sword to his son, Jorah. But then in Westeros, Jorah did dishonored himself with the family, as we mentioned in an earlier episode. And so then before he was exiled out of, or left, or whatever the term is there, out of Westeros, he left the family sword with his father. I don't know. I don't know if that's mentioned in the episodes. I don't think it's in the book here. But that he probably just left it with the family, or might have even gone up to Castle Black to say, I'm leaving, father, and I'm not coming back, and left the sword with him.
Yeah. But then they kind of have a conversation there about some of the stuff going on, and Jorah says, Gior talks to him about basically, he's upset, he's like slightly upset with Jon about his kind of little feud he has going with Alistair Thorne. Again, gonna take this opportunity to say fuck Alistair Thorne. But
start taking a note of how many times you say
this
that.
This guy just completely misunderstood.
Oh, yes, it's totally. But he was actually sent to King's Landing with the hand that they found that basically resulted in them bringing the whites into Castle Black and stuff like that.
Yes.
And they're going to take him to King's Landing to try and talk to the people down there and saying, hey, we've got a bigger problem up here.
Again, just really quick, the whole sole purpose of the Night's Watch is to protect against White Walkers and rights and the things north of the wall. So, like, this is the equivalent of them being like, all right, listen up, here's the proof that what we're doing is important and we need more backup because these things are here. We all saw this. And, yeah, hopefully the people down south get their heads out of their butts and pay attention.
Yeah, so then Jon... Nick said butt. So then Jon takes the sword into like the kitchen dining hall area to kind of show his fellow brothers of the Watch there, and they all kind of like look and examine the sword. And then he sees Sam just kind of sitting at the table with his head hung low, and so he sits down next to Sam and says, what's the problem, Sam? Come on, you can tell me. And Sam says how he read a message to Maester Aemon there that Robb Stark is now marching south to war. And Jon thinks he needs to be there because Jon and Robb basically were brothers growing up.
Yeah.
So after that, we then move over to the part where they discuss the terms of the deal, Gary, here. So I'll just kind of lay out kind of what the terms were there. So as part of the deal for Walder Frey to allow the army to cross, Robb has to take one of Walder's sons on as kind of a squire. Eventually, knighthood hopefully will be in the future for him. Arya is going to be married off to one of Walder's sons, which I'm sure she will absolutely love. And then Rob has to marry a daughter of Walder's, of his choosing there, basically. And he asked Catelyn, like, did you get a good look at any of them? And she said one was,
Yeah, not really a glowing recommendation there for brides to be.
So my note on the rewatch that obviously is a little more, I don't know, it just stuck with me a little more, was like, okay, I always remembered that Rob had to take a wife, and it's kind of a punchline at the end. I was like, one of them isn't that ugly, but it's kind of glossed over. Like, oh yeah, Arya is going to marry, and it was like, Frey, so I don't know if that's. I'm guessing that she would marry the first in line of succession.
Well, I'm sure that that's what Catelyn would want, because then her daughter would be closer to being a lordess or something.
Yeah, but that made me kind of rewind to an earlier conversation I think Ned and Arya had. Where like, well, someday you'll be you'll marry
Little lady.
a
That's it. Yeah.
and you'll bring him lots of children. And I was just like, oh. So then the ultimate goal is that Arya Stark would be the lord of the the lady of the twins.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, ooh, that's rough.
Yeah. A lot of times these marriages in medieval history were simply to like broker peace or, barter in treaties with other rich families. The Lannisters and the Baratheons, when you get Robb and Cersei, and the Robert, before he passed away, and like the first episode says, I have a son, meaning Joffrey, you have a daughter, to Ned Stark, let's get them married. And like, just, that's how it was done. It's just, yeah, we have a daughter, I have a son, and they're only for that purpose. They're trained in combat, they're trained to be, archers, boyars, horse riders, but the purpose was to basically, you're going to marry someone rich, and just, it's all about the titles and the pomp and circumstance.
It's not even necessarily marry somebody rich. You're going to marry somebody of importance to consider like consolidating power and stuff among the families.
The highborn stay highborn and the lowborn stay low.
Exactly.
I use the term consolidate power, which is actually a terminology from the Game of Thrones board game. So it made me.
That's true.
So
Anyway.
Rob does agree to these terms here because it is the only way basically to cross the river there successfully if they want to kind of get moving as an army. And I want to point out here again, like I kind of said here at the beginning, of the music here of them kind of crossing the river and stuff is really good. The composer, again, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I should look this up. Ramin Djawadi, I'm going to go with right now. It's probably a terrible butchering, but he does a fantastic job of basically just putting in music that just kind of sets up the scene or just kind of enhances the scene as you're watching it there.
Not as bad a butchering as the Butcher's Boy, though. Ho!
Shake head. All right. So next we have Jon kind of gets summoned up to talk to Maester Aemon there. And it's kind of like a great scene because it's like our first, as watchers, basically, our first scene of like listening to like the one-on-one conversations between a character and Maester Aemon. Because like I said, some of the earlier episodes where I think Maester Aemon's just a great character overall to kind of listen to. And they kind of have a history, they get like a little history lesson on the Night's Watch and kind of like some of their vows there. What is honor compared to love? What is duty compared to that of holding a newborn son in your arms there?
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote down, no one knows. I can't remember exactly what the connotation was for that.
No one knows who he is?
No, well, I think it's...
no one would understand the trouble I'm in. You don't understand why this decision weighs heavily on me.
Yep, because he's also talking to Jon basically about like Jon. He knows that Jon kind of has this decision that's kind of floating around in his mind of like, does he want to stay in the Night's Watch as he swore his oath and everything like that, or does he want to leave and go help Robb basically with this war here? And then that's where you get kind of Maester Aemon revealing a little bit more about himself, where he reveals that he was tested with this same problem at one point in time, but unfortunately his test came when he was kind of old and frail already, when basically he's talking about like how his family was wiped out, the kids were killed, and all of that, and it was really hard to learn. It was really hard to learn that the babies were slaughtered in their cribs and things like that. And then it's basically kind of revealed that he was a Targaryen or I should say is a Targaryen.
He is, but I'm sure we'll just jump to Nick giving the real huge. He is the Mad King's brother, or the Mad King's uncle.
I want to say great uncle almost.
It sounded like there was him, somebody else, and then that somebody else had a kid, and then they had a kid, which was the Mad King.
Yeah. As far as the history, I just had it up here. Yeah, he is the.
Tyler's gonna.
He would be like the great uncle, because it's not direct. He was brothers to Aegon the Fourth, Aegon the Unlikely, and Aegon the Fourth had Jaehaerys, and Jaehaerys had Aerys and Rhaella. So yeah, he would. Oh dang, that's actually like grandfather. Is that how it goes? Great is
great uncle.
Great is one uncle one removed, or is that like uncle second removed or something?
Your grandfather's brother is your great uncle.
Yep.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, he was the Mad King's great uncle.
Yep.
That was really interesting, like especially on a rewatch. Just understand, and you guys are saying great uncle. I just assumed he was like the Mad King's uncle. So like Daenerys was like 2 generations below him, but now you guys just confirmed
she's 4th.
So when this is happening, like 3 generations below him was dying, and he's just like, I'm too old for this shit.
Yeah, well, like Tyler just mentioned, he's old and frail. It's interesting. It's like his line or what he's left behind. One of my favorite quotes is always, be wary of of an old man in a world where young men die quick or something. I just butchered that. But like, yeah, beware of an old man in a world. Be wary of an old man in a profession. That's what it usually is. In a profession where people die young. It's like he's old and wise because he's managed to not die young. He knows some stuff. He's wise beyond his years. And I think that's part of the intrigue, like Tyler said, that makes him such a great character, is we're seeing Robb Stark and Joffrey Baratheon and even Robert Baratheon, who's, like this great warrior. But they're all relatively young people. Jon Snow is sort of seeming like he's going to kind of be set up to be Jeor Mormont's right-hand man with Longclaw and everything, but he's still a young man, whereas Aemon has seen much of the world and what was the Targaryen dynasty. And yeah, so he has a lot to talk about when he says that I'm not going to tell you to go north or to stay here. You have to make your own choices in life.
So maybe it was a quick line, did Maester Aemon pass on the throne?
No. There's a lot in the book. I actually found this page that talks about him. I'm not going to go through all of it, but yeah.
To it, and it's like the throne passed to, like, my father was this, and the throne passed. No, I thought maybe he said as I passed on the throne, as I did something, the throne passed to.
Yes. He did of his own accord. He became a maester. All the maesters, and again, the maester just means the learned person in an area, and then you're assigned somewhere, or you're a friend of a family house. When he became
was the firstborn, and he decided to be a maester, which by extent
he was the third son in his family. Yep, he was the third son in his family. Just a little clip here says Maekar's third son, because he said my father was Maekar the first. He says that line there. Maekar's third son, Aemon, was a bookish boy who had been sent to the Citadel in his youth. That's out in Old Town, way over in the Reach, in the far southwestern portion of Westeros. Sent to the Citadel in his youth, and emerged as a sworn and chained maester. And so part of that is you take vows, I'd imagine similar to the Night's Watch, where you're not going to have a family or hold any titles. And just, the way the Targaryens all died early or had some war they fought, his line of succession did come up, but since he was a chained maester, he couldn't. And so that would be that line you just said, Gary, where it passed by his own acceptance or disavowment that I passed on this, and it went to somebody else, and instead to his younger brother, Aegon the Fourth. Since Aemon was the third son, Aegon the Fifth was the fourth son of a fourth son, which is not the direct descendancy, and that's why Aegon the Fifth is known as Aegon the Unlikely, because he wasn't the one anyone thought would ever sit on the Iron Throne, but just happened to be that that's the way it went.
So when Aemon left his house, they were still in good power.
Yes.
Timeline-wise, was that before or after the dragons all died?
The dragons at that time had probably dwindled down to just the size of small house cats. They were not very powerful. It was mostly just that they were the ruling dynasty of Targaryens, not because they had the dragon. There's just the prestige, more so the dynasty name.
Just maybe we can try to wrap up this, but just the fact that like when Aemon left his house, when he went his own direction, like the Targaryen lineage was still in good standing and was a great house in Westeros, and then
He watched.
since then, in 2 or 3 generations, it just
he
went to shit.
he watched the basically fall, like the slow decline of his house to basically the utter complete it being wiped off the face of the planet.
Correct.
There, basically.
Correct. Just really quick, because it's interesting anecdote in here. It mentions Brynden Rivers, who's known as Bloodraven in the history of Westeros, was the hand of the king, did something not wise but poorly viewed as not good politics. And so Brynden Rivers, Bloodraven, was sentenced to go be a ranger at take the black, essentially, and go to the wall. And Aemon, being related to Brynden Rivers, who had a Targaryen backstory, went with him. That's how Aemon Targaryen ended up at the wall, when Brynden Rivers, the character known as Bloodraven, went north of the wall. Some 50, 60 years, I imagine. Maybe not quite that, but they're both fairly young individuals. So Aemon's been up there at the wall for some time.
Okay. All right. So we now move on to then basically cut to the Dothraki there. And Khal Drogo, we kind of look at him, and he does not look very good right now here. He seems...
He's seen better days.
Seen better days. He ends up falling off of his horse, which is a very big no-no in Dothraki culture there. That basically means any Khal who, I think it's said there, basically like any Khal who can't stay on his horse is not fit to lead. And Dany's kind of trying to do, like, she gets off her horse and is trying to do everything she can to kind of deflect the Dothraki away from this situation. Like, oh no, it's not bad, he's just really tired and all of that. And she says to send for that healer lady, basically, who had allegedly healed Khal Drogo the first time there.
On a rewatch, the number of times that he is warned about, like, that this lady's a witch, on the first watch you're like, oh well, these are just fucking barbarians. Like, they'd call any sort of intelligent thought a witch. And then, like, it was, I think, probably 5 or 6 times that she was like, you don't, like, F her, she's a witch. And then in this episode, you're like, holy shit, she's a witch. Like, there's a reason that people were very disrespectful to her, is because she's not playing above board.
Exactly. So then we get a small cut basically back to Tyrion in his father's camp there, where he joins the council table there basically to learn what the plans are for attack, and he finds out that him and his hill tribe are part of the vanguard, or the front lines of the upcoming attack there. Which Tyrion is very displeased to find out, because it's kind of like another showing of like how much his father really likes his son Tyrion.
Also, just a quick turnaround that he like joined the table of war leaders of all the great lords in the camp, and is like, oh, grab some wine, and they're like, oh, we got surprise news, you're leading the vanguard. And he's like, ah, shit. And then he just, like, he's not even at the table that long. I think he gets a drink, and then he's like, I think I should go now.
I'm not as hungry as I thought I was. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, then,
when you see the two big armies charging at each other in most of these movies, like, that's the vanguard, like the middle front line section of people. So yeah, it's pretty much understood that you're either going to be the toughest, strongest warriors in that line, or you're the people who just charge first and are likely going to die.
Cannon fodder.
Exactly.
But then Tyrion basically makes his
Red
way back
shirts.
to his tent, where he finds Bronn and this lady, who we come to find out her name is Shay. And other than basically saying that she's just straight up a prostitute there or whatever, she's just a lady of the night, kind of in the camp with all of these soldiers. Bronn says he took her from some guy 3 tents down or something like that, who probably won't be very happy to find that out.
Yep.
Then is it implied that maybe he that Bronn killed that guy or knocked him out?
Implied that I think Bronn did something to get the lady's services taken from that guy.
Yeah, moving forward.
Okay. So then we just kind of cut back to then the Dothraki there, where there's,
Wait. Doesn't I'm trying to think here. Sorry, my notes are not as good as they usually are. Isn't this where he says, what do you want from me? And he says, I want you to love me like you'll never, like it's my last night on Earth.
Yeah.
All that conversation.
Like last night on Earth.
I know. I was trying to not be so crude, but yes. And she says, what do you get from me? And he says, safety and all the more gold than you could spend in 1,000 lifetimes. Just that, to Tyrion, it's almost like he wants
companionship.
He wants love and acceptance. Companionship, I was going to say, is the thing that he really is after most. That no one will hurt you. I want someone to talk to, but someone who loves me, obviously. But while it is physical, it's almost more just the companionship part of it. And I think that's what Tyrion really wants.
Also, it's just sort of accepted that he's if people are hanging around with him, that he just assumes that the expectation is that they want some percentage of gold for their time.
Yeah.
And I think a very quick scene before we move was that Tyrion tells Bronn that, oh yeah, we're in the Vanguard tomorrow, and he's like, okay, I think I need to go find me some alcohol and ladies, because I don't know why Bronn would necessarily be a necessity to be in the Vanguard. He's just a sellsword.
Well,
but
he said that he wants to be around because Tyrion said, stick with me and I'll give you all the more gold than you'll know what to do with. And so he's kind of hanging on Tyrion too until he gets a percentage. At this point, I think it's more, I want my my payback for saving your life in the Eyrie and helping you out to this point too.
Well, yeah, and I assume that he's got to keep Tyrion alive, because if Tyrion dies, all the promises Tyrion made to him, his dad or no one else is going to honor those promises. So
yes,
he's got to keep Tyrion alive.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, rolling forward.
Sorry, just had to point that out. I thought it was an interesting interaction.
Exactly, yeah. So next is just kind of, we get back to the Dothraki there. So I want to pose a question here first, and then we're going to kind of go through the scene, and then we'll talk about that question a little bit more here too. So the question I want to pose first is, do you think that the healer was actually trying to heal the wound there, or was she did she make it worse pretty much with what she did to it? So just ponder the question for just a little bit. We'll kind of just talk about this scene, and then we'll go back to that question there.
Okay.
So the Dothraki, basically, their society is, Jorah points out that their society more or less honors strength, not weakness, or, not tradition like the Westeros kind of families do as far as like line of succession and everything like that. Because Jorah says basically, hey, we need to get out of here. We need to get out like 10 miles away from this, because when he dies, they will turn on you very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Or they'll throw your son, they'll feed your son to the dogs.
Yep. Khaleesi just will not leave there, so she basically tells Jorah, it's probably a good idea if you don your armor tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And then, she ends up talking to the witch lady there and, is asking her, like, is there anything you can do, anything with magic? And of course, there's always some spell to try and save somebody, but of course, it always comes with a price.
Mm-hmm.
And the price for this one is, only life can pay for death here. It's some dark blood magic there. So then they basically bring Khal Drogo's horse into the tent, and The witch lady slices its throat and blood just spews everywhere out of there. Dany leaves the tent, walks out into the Dothraki people there. Basically, they all just kind of form a circle away from her to kind of get away from her because they think
she's got blood all over her.
Yeah. And then one of the guys comes, I think they're probably one of Khal Drogo's blood riders, comes up and kind of pushes Dany, and she ends up falling down on top of her stomach there, basically, which is a bad thing.
Yep.
And Jorah ends up fighting that guy and basically wins because of like his armor and his knowledge of kind of fighting the Dothraki before, because I think it was maybe claimed way back earlier that he was one of the few people to successfully defeat a Dothraki blood rider before.
Well, it was the fact that Dothraki, I think it was just talked about, like, why do you guys wear armor? Like, and it's like, doesn't it make you slow? And it's like, but it's because the Dothraki just don't understand that, like, if you're not fighting on horseback, you're fighting face to face, like, you can trade a lot more blows, and if you don't have something to protect you, like, you might win the battle but lose the war, as you know, as they say.
Yeah. The way the guy fights with him, he slashes at Jorah's face and he gets a slice, I think, on his cheek.
Yep.
Going for his head. But then just the way, the Dothraki are trained, he takes a swipe at Jorah's side, which is covered in, plate mail, and it doesn't do anything.
And I think he basically
Jorah,
grabs,
pinches it.
Yep.
Locks it around his body.
Yeah,
like,
and the guy's face is like surprised, like, that didn't hurt you? And he's just like, no, you're screwed. And slices right across his face. So yeah, it's just the style. Yeah, a sword to the side isn't really going to do much, especially if somebody's wearing armor.
But then basically Dany kind of feels like the baby is getting ready to come now because of this accident she has, and one of Dany's kind of male servants guys there says we should take her to the healer witch lady, or she knows. I've heard her muttering basically she knows how to save him. And then Dany is picked up basically by Jorah, and they're walked back into the tent, which is kind of an ominous thing too, because as Dany was leaving the tent, basically the witch lady said, what did she say?
The dead will dance here tonight.
The dead will dance here, and make sure nobody basically comes back in.
Right, which whatever she's doing is against what Dany's about to do coming back into the tent, so there might be some demonic bad stuff going on there too. There's like shrieking. Like I was watching that with captions just because there was chaos at my house, and the captions are just like demonic shrieking over and over again in the background. So it's clearly not just like, ooh, eerie, ominous noise. There is some weird blood magic stuff going on in that tent with that witch lady, Khal Drogo's probably corpse at this point, and the horse's spirit. So
exactly. All right, so I want to circle now back to that question that I posed to us before we started talking about this scene here of, do we think the healer lady, aka the witch lady, did she, doing whatever she did she make the problem worse, or did it just kind of naturally get worse on its own?
Nick can start.
I don't know what you're doing.
On my screen, you're down here.
Oh, gotcha. I think that she was doing it with the intent to make the call sick. I don't think she was doing it to be helpful. Obviously this is a fictitious world and it's not our world, but in our world, even very primitive tribes that we would consider more barbarian, more indigenous, know how to treat and heal a wound. When he got the wound across his chest, it was a small scrape, essentially, from a sword. I would imagine Khal Drogo being a Khal, he's had many scrapes in his life, so it's nothing too bad. He even says and looks at it and he goes, it's a scratch, But then
fly bite or something like that.
Yeah. But yet after the lady, because we don't actually see her try to treat his wound, she just like does something, and the next time we see him, he's like feeling the effects of it being seriously infected. And so I think that absolutely she probably did something with the intent to make it infected, with the intent to make it worse. Did she intend to kill him? That I don't know at this point. We'll see here, because I think that whatever comes out of the tent will be a bit more revealing. But I think that she definitely did something with the intent to hurt the person whose people slaughtered hers.
I would agree with that, but it's really tough to say if her life is better, because technically she already knows that, like, and maybe the goal is that if you can weaken the Carl.
It's not
Yeah,
Carl.
Carl.
You can weaken Carl. If you can weaken Carl, you can. There will be a struggle in the interim, and maybe that's when you get the fuck out of here. Like, there's gonna
That
be a
could
bad,
be.
like, there's gonna be a power struggle, and all these slaves can just be like, I'm gonna get GT the fuck out, and you guys
could
can
be.
figure out and then you can reform your Khalasar when I'm gone.
Could be.
Okay.
So maybe I don't know. On the rewatch, maybe she's. I just always assume that healer people are nice, but as I said, like, you find out she's actually a witch, like, so I don't know.
She knows spells, blood magic. She knows this demonic stuff. Maybe she's like a necromancer, where it's like, yeah, I know magic. I'm a good person, but it's like, what's your speciality? Healing the dead, working with spirits. That kind of thing is not really frowned upon. Is not really seen as a good thing, which is why the rest of the blood riders are all very freaked out about her. But maybe that's what she kind of leaned into. It's like, yeah, well, this helps the dead. But if Khal Drogo's not fully dead, then is she really helping him, or is she making him dead?
Okay.
I don't know. I don't fully. I would think that there'd be some sort of general understanding of like cuts, but could also be that they haven't talked about if Dothraki weapons are poisoned or.
Yeah.
Going very much into a very long spoilery thing is that some people have poison on their blades, but there also could just be rusty ass swords.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sharp.
I mean, yeah, it could just be tetanus or something that this group would not know about.
And it was also kind of a deep cut. Like, I think he walked into the blade. It wasn't like
he rubbed into it.
Slash. It was like a pressing cut into his shoulder.
Conspiracy theories abound, my friends.
Put on our tinfoil hats.
Ultimately, whatever.
Yeah.
I think all people are good, Nick.
Wow, that's a bold statement to make there, Gary.
Let's keep going and find out more about this world of everybody's a good person.
Everybody's a good person. They're all nice to one another. So next we go back to Camp Lannister. They're basically with Shae, Tyrion, and Bronn playing drinking games within the tent. And then they play we kind of commonly know it as the Never Have I Ever game, or Truth or Drink, or something like that, I guess. Basically, it's Tyrion says he's such an excellent judge of character that he could sit there, look at somebody, and ask them a question, and more than likely be right about his assumption there.
Yeah.
So basically the game is played where if Tyrion's right, they drink. If Tyrion's wrong, Tyrion drinks. So we learn a couple of interesting points about Bronn there. It was like he's been north of the Wall. His first kill was a woman.
Yeah, she swung an axe at him.
Yeah, exactly. And then we come to find out that when Tyrion tries to turn it to Shae, who really does not want to play this game, he is apparently so wrong about his thoughts on Shae of like who she is and everything like that. Now, whether she was being completely honest there with him or not, I don't really know. She's definitely like I don't think I mentioned this, she's a little later, she's definitely a like sarcastic and quick-witted person there to kind of somewhat match tit for tat with Tyrion there with their minds, but obviously
very
like,
much.
Tyrion is definitely the more knowledgeable person about the world and everything like that, but she's got a little bit more, it seems like, the streetwise common sense almost somewhat to go along with her. But then we get Tyrion's telling of probably the tied for saddest story so far in the Game of Thrones universe. There were
what's the tie with
Sam's story there, basically, where we learn why Sam was up at north of the Wall.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say this deception from the Lannister family is worse than Sam's.
I don't know. Having a father basically say, like, if you don't denounce your claim to the family lands or I'm going to kill you, is kind of a bigger deal than, oh, hey, I was tricked into marriage, or well, Tyrion took it too far, I think, but it was just, I fell in love with, no, Tyrion took it too far because he fell in love, so he was thinking basically with the wrong part of his body, ended up marrying her, and then made the situation a lot worse when it found out who she really was.
He was young and he was drunk.
Yep. So basically,
Agree to disagree.
So basically, the story goes that Tyrion and Jaime were riding down a road one day, and this lady comes stumbling out of the woods, kind of clothes ripped up a bit, and then two men chasing after her. Jaime chases after these two people, and Tyrion goes to kind of comfort this gal, and they end up going to the closest inn and eating 3 chickens, finishing off a flagon of wine or whiskey or something like that, and they end up kind of falling, like sleeping together then that day.
Mm-hmm.
And then they wake up the next day and kind of go get a septum drunk and kind of convince the septum to basically marry them too. So then, because Tyrion was so in love with this lady here, he thought she was everything.
Yep.
So then the septum sobers up and tells Tyrion's father, Tywin, and then it is revealed by Tywin that this was all kind of a ruse by Jaime there, basically to get Tyrion laid for his first time. And then as kind of a, I don't want to say punishment, but just like a sick
Sick
is probably the only thing I could probably think of for it. Tywin basically punishes
Parenting.
Parenting. Yes, this is what all parents should do.
Drive home the point to Tyrion that, like, it wasn't like just a ha, like, but she might really have feelings for me. It's like, no, we're gonna run this horse through the mill a couple more times until you realize, like, she's just in it for the money, bro.
Yeah, so Tywin basically gives, air quotes, Tyrion's wife a silver coin for every guard that she sleeps with, or, takes care of basically during that day. And
yeah,
Tyrion basically said she had so much silver by the end of it that it was just falling out of her hands as she was walking.
That's just, and made him watch.
And made him watch. Yep, they went into the barracks to make him watch too.
You know what? He's Tywin, son of whatever the fuck. He's the Warden of the West.
Warden of the West, Lord Paramount of the Westerlands. And
he understands that Tyrion's a liability. He's gotta whip him to shape. This is parenting, motherfucker. Like,
when Tyrion was born, he tore his mother, and essentially his son killed his wife. Clearly not his son's fault, but there's a big part of Tywin Lannister, the dad, who despises Tyrion. He's his son because he was born of him, and for that reason he's a Lannister, and he will always protect Lannister, his kids, because like he said when we first met him, well, soon I'll be dead and it'll just be you and your brother and your sister. What's the family lives on, the family commands respect, and that's what he looks after. But Tyrion Lannister is the name, and that's who he wants to command respect and be someone of importance and renown. But as Tywin's son, Tyrion, he despises him. And this story really drove that home for me. I talked about in the beginning of this recording the back and forth play on the scenarios, how trying to get the names right, how the son...
You were trying to say duality.
Duality, yeah. Dichotomy, duality. Tyrion, the son, kind of starts off the game saying he's such a good character, he can read people, and it's so hard to really kind of get to him. But clearly this is like, he just breaks down, and he starts this story saying it's not a pleasant story, and he's like standing up to walk away, like he doesn't want to tell it. But I was watching the physicality of Peter Dinklage as he was telling the story, and by the end, he's like leaning against a pole, sitting down, his head's tilted low, just defeated, rethinking of this horrific story of his childhood.
Because both Shay and Bronn know that there's a story about his, wife, but it's just really just a short, like, kind of jab that, the Lannister soldiers can give. But also, like, earlier on in the episode, kind of talking about, like, Tyrion's going to be in the vanguard, like, it sort of maybe is getting the point that maybe Tywin would be okay if Tyrion died, but he needs to die in like a way of honor.
Sure.
Like,
yeah. Well,
he doesn't need to like die as a drunk in a brothel. Like he needs to die a lordly death.
Sure.
But as for the value of how he dies or when, like there's no like what do I want to say? Protective. There's no protective nature to the person. It's a protective nature to the title and the
Absolutely.
To the
honor.
family.
Anyway.
Absolutely. I forget the adjective that Tywin says that Tyrion says, but he looks right at his father. He's like, "Isn't there less obvious ways to kill me?" When he's at that table with the lords.
Yeah. I forget
It's
exactly.
like it's clear. Yeah, you want me to be in the Vanguard, and he's like blown away. He's like, "Clearly, I'm not fit for the Vanguard. Isn't there less obvious ways to kill me?"
Yeah, he that's basically a paraphrase line of what he says, but yeah, he basically tries to imply like, I understand this is kind of like spelling certain doom for me.
Mm-hmm.
You want to roll forward to the next morning?
But yeah, then Tyrion's awakened the next morning there basically, and it's like the battle is getting ready to start. The Starks have apparently, the Northern Army has basically made it closer to them than they thought in the night.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tyrion's getting basically dressed in his armor and everything, and he comes out and he asks Bronn, do you have any like suggestions for me or tips, whatever? He says, "Stay low."
My squire. My squire. You don't have a squire.
Oh yeah. Tyrion asks Bronn to fetch his squire. He's like, "You don't have a squire." But then
help him get all his armor on and ready to go.
But then I like that Tyrion gives like a nice rallying cry to his tribesmen there, basically, and pumps them all up, and then they take off charging, and then Tyrion gets kind of like lost in the shuffle, kind of compacted. Then he like turns and looks, and then just gets smacked with a warhammer basically in the face and dropped down, knocked him unconscious for the battle there.
By accident. I don't think they meant it.
Yeah, it wasn't on purpose. It was by accident, but like it was kind of funny. He gets taken out of the battle basically through this just sheer dumb luck.
Mm-hmm.
Really good. We don't talk a lot about like cinematography of like I think it cuts to like the next, him waking up after he gets hit in the head, and it's just this like weird trailing shot, whatever.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Following his head, and as it's moving on the dirt, and you're like, why is he sliding? What's going on? And I was like, oh, he's just being dragged behind a wagon.
No, he's up on a cart, at least. They've put him
he's up on a cart, yeah.
Yeah, and then we see that Bronn survived the battle, so... and then
Cracking shot.
And then Tyrion kind of wakes up and kind of is conscious enough to ask Bronn, like, did we win? He's like, we wouldn't be alive to ask that question there, now would we?
Ooh,
something like that.
Wouldn't be having this conversation if we lost.
Yep. Then Tywin rides up on them, and Tyrion kind of asks, like, how'd it go? And, like, we won the day, slaughtered these, like, men or whatever, like 2,000 of them. And it's like, that seems like a low number. It's like, well, what about Robb Stark? He's with the other 18,000 men. So it's kind of like, okay, well, something happened here kind of within the battle. And then we kind of are cut to Cat and Sir Roderick sitting up on a hillside, basically in the trees, just kind of staring out, wondering, what's going on here. And we kind of learn then that was all a diversion here for what had happened. And you get some good music, basically, that, starts playing again. Great music, guy, the composer. I've already butchered his name earlier in the podcast. I won't try it again. Great music as Robb and like some of his bannermen come riding out of the forest there, basically, to just kind of comment, it was a diversion. And then they reveal a nice surprise that they have captured Sir Jaime Lannister.
Bum, bum, bum.
They tricked him there in the battle. And then you get kind of a nice moment there where Robb is just kind of reflecting on all that had happened, and he's got this kind of regret in his heart that he feels that he basically sent essentially 2,000 men to go die so that they could basically do this diversionary battle here to overwhelm Jaime's forces. And then
Theon says the bards will sing tales of their sacrifice.
Yep.
Dead men hear no tales or something.
And then Robb shoots back, the dead won't hear it.
Yes. And then,
it shows he's a compassionate leader at the very least. He's not just, playing with pawns, but he cares about the lives of those who die for his cause.
Exactly. And then it kind of seems like everybody's just kind of all high and excited about this, feeling that rush. And then Rob basically delivers like somewhat of a resounding speech that basically to remind the troops of, this is what we're doing. This is what we're fighting for here. This one battle is not going to solve everything. We're still, his father is still captured. His sisters are still captured and everything like that.
He doesn't cancel the apocalypse.
He did not cancel the apocalypse, unfortunately. All right, so now we cut then to King's Landing there. We found Arya is out roaming the streets of King's Landing there, basically just kind of avoiding the Gold Cloak army, and she's trying to do what she can to kind of keep surviving. She ends up capturing a dove to try and either eat or do something with it. She tries to pawn it off on a bread maker there to try and get some food because she's probably been out for a little while without any food.
I want to point out just really quick, even the improvement of her skills as a warrior, in the sense that she was originally chasing cats and now she's chasing birds. Like, I would think a bird would be even harder to catch because they can fly away. And the fact that she was able to catch one and snap its neck, the remorselessness, the quickness, the ability to do what needs to be done in the moment. She's definitely not her sister. Sansa is very tender-hearted, very sweet, very compassionate, very caring, looking to fit into that peg niche of this, I'm a lady, and like we were talking earlier, I need to marry someone of stature. Whereas Arya is literally covered in dirt, catching birds and snapping their necks. Literally, she's going to eat it until she saw that this person had food next to her.
And then, so... after a conversation with the baker, she sees a bunch of people kind of running one direction there, and she asks one of the little kids running by, like, what's going on? And the kid yells out, hey, they're taking the hand of the Sept of Baelor. And then we get cut to shot of the Sept of Baelor. So I kind of wrote myself a little note here. Nick, do we have kind of a little bit of history to talk about the Sept of Baelor?
So the Sept of Baelor is named after Baelor the First Targaryen. He was known as Baelor the Blessed, Baelor the Beloved. He was a king one of the Targaryen kings. Oh, his father was Aegon III, Aegon the Dragonbane, right after the Dance of Dragons. So long time ago, essentially. I don't have the years here in front of me, but right after the Dance of Dragons, a lot of common people died. And a lot of actual Targaryens died. So there's basically this huge rift between what was the old way and what is becoming the new way. And Baelor just kind of came between everything and really focused on religion. The Sept is named after Septons and Septas, which have been referenced in the episodes already. Those people who are the religious, go-tos, like the High Septon is a position of great renown in this world. And so the Sept is just the building, and it's known as the Sept of Baelor. He had it built to commission to the new gods. The old gods kind of references the weirwood trees and the children of the forest, the old gods. Like the Starks have the weirwood forest and the weirwood tree with the carved face. And the new gods is the seven. The Sept has a big star with 7 points, 7-pointed stars. A newer god compared to the old god, and that's what the Sept is just this large religious building that was commissioned in King's Landing. King's Landing was known as a city of 3 hills, and the biggest hill has the Red Keep in it. The second biggest hill has the Sept of Baelor on it, and the other one had the Dragon Pit where all the Targaryens kept their dragons.
Yeah. So then we kind of get Ned is being taken towards the crowd there, basically, and he happens to catch that he sees Arya out hiding underneath one of the statues in the crowd there, and he happens to just also then catch one of the men of the Night's Watch who had come to King's Landing, basically looking for prisoners and stuff to take back to the wall.
That's what it was, wasn't it? I was trying to think where we saw him before. He was one of the guys who came down from the north who knew Jon, right?
Yes. Well, I don't know if he completely knew Jon, but he was just one of the men on the Night's Watch, basically making his rounds to the prisons, basically, and trying to convince people to send more people up north to the wall.
Okay.
He rode with Tyrion from the Castle Black until Tyrion was captured.
That's what it
And then
was.
he rode with haste to King's Landing to beat so that he could tell Ned before anyone else got news that, Tyrion had been captured.
Okay,
Gotcha.
yep, exactly, yep. He basically tells this guy, hey, he basically says, Baelor, Baelor, and then he sees...
That's the statue of Baelor, yep.
Yep, and then the guy sees that Ned's daughter is sitting out there, so he tries to make his way to her. But then, so we get a scene there where Ned, I'm going to throw the air quotes out there, confesses and says he was wrong in what he did, that Joffrey is the true king of Westeros there, and he dishonored the memory of his friend Robert there.
Okay, can I interject again?
Sure.
Again, Gary, the duality of this whole scene a couple times throughout this episode, in the very beginning with Varys pleads with him, just lie, do what you have to do to play your part, because your part will bring peace to the realm. Yeah, you'll probably get exiled, but you won't die. There won't be chaos. Your sons won't come wreak havoc and revenge. I think at one point too, when Jon is up in the north talking with Aemon, or maybe it's with Gior, Lord Commander, he has a similar reference too, where he says, "What would your father?" Aemon says, "What would your father Ned do if he were forced with a difficult decision between love and duty?" And Jon says he would do the right thing. And he says, "Well, your father is 1 in 10,000. That's the rare case. Most men would break right away and do the love or do the duty." And at the end, that is the duality in this scenario, is that up to this point, Ned has always done what the good soldier would do, what the honorable thing should be done. Because he says, I made my peace with death a while ago. But it's like you said, when he mentions your daughter's life, is that a precious thing to you? Love is the death of duty. He breaks from being a soldier, and that's when he cracks. In order to try and save his daughters, Ned finally like you said, air quotes, confesses, because he thinks it will save not himself, maybe he hopes himself, but it's what his daughter's life that he's worried about.
Okay, first of all, Tyrion's confession, much better. Second, I would say that maybe just Nick referenced back to the earlier conversation with Varys, and maybe just the realization that, it just took Ned some time to kind of absorb that information. So Varys did what was best for the realm, which is that he gave Ned the hard facts of this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
I understand it's not going to be easy for you, but this is what you got to do. And it maybe shows how much that even though Ned disagrees with Varys, he understood that Varys is wise. He didn't get to where he was at by making the wrong moves.
Right.
That's all I had on that.
So then after Ned's confession there, basically it's kind of Maester Pycelle talks for a little bit there about mercy and Baelor kind of being a wise man of forgiving people. And then they turn it over to Joffrey, and Joffrey, being the little shit that he is, pretty much there, says, no, mercy is for the women there, basically. Treason needs to be dealt with swift punishment there, and he asks for Ilyn Payne, basically, to behead. He wants Ned's head, basically, to behead him.
Bring me his head, yep.
And Sir Ilyn Payne ends up beheading Ned with his own sword, ice.
The gigantic...
I was going to say that. I caught that it was ice. And do you think that was intentional or just happened to be the weapon that was on hand?
Probably a little intentional there. It was his sword. Although it's weird that Ned took that sword with him all the way down to King's Landing.
That is interesting. There's a point there that Joffrey considers mercy, but doesn't. He has the choice there. Like the way you feel about Sir Alistair Thorne is how I feel about Joffrey. And this moment, both the first time I saw it, kind of took my breath away, and I really thought, okay, Joffrey's just a terrible person. But this time too, rewatching it, there's little hints that he's just a terrible person and has this darker tendency to lean towards the negative. This really seals it for me that Joffrey is the antagonist of this series at this point. There's a lot of different characters that are trying to get their own arcs and their own story and their own goals to come to fruition, but Joffrey is just the person who wants to watch the world burn.
Kind of just an
Like-
agent of chaos there almost.
Agent of chaos, exactly. Because like you said, Maester Pycelle says that he'll be okay. Like Joffrey turns and looks at Sansa, he looks at his mother, and everyone says, okay, you know, that's good. We'll let him go and take the black. And, you know, a subdued wolf. There's even a line, I forget who says it in this episode, where a subdued wolf is better than a dead one. And you can see that he thinks about it for a second and decides, no, I want to assert that I'm the toughest, baddest, whatever, and I just don't like Ned because he said mean things to me. And turns and says, I want his head. And you can see everyone else up on that pedestal say this is not a good idea. Sansa's in tears, and Cersei even, who knows Ned, knows what she does with her brother, is saying, this is madness, stop this. And everyone knows this is not the right move. This is only going to lead to chaos. And what happens.
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, my question. So everyone's been really hard on my boy Joffrey.
He's your
So,
boy?
He's got my heart. Just okay. So if you're this hard on Joffrey, playing devil's advocate, how would Robert Baratheon handle that sort of bullshittery? If it was Robert, like, and it's just, for me, it's the question of, like, is this the influence of the Lannisters side of him, or is it the Baratheon side of him? Because Robert was very much like, you know, without honor, like, I'm the fucking king. Whereas the Lannisters would very much try to, like, play this, like, play the game of politics. Like, I think it's definitely a Robert Baratheon move.
The brashiness.
He is a little bit immature, but I think that what he focuses there, what he diluted down to, like, the single thing is that he did what the warrior would do. He didn't do what the politician would do.
Again, with what we know thus far in the story, there is no Baratheon in Joffrey. So I don't
that.
I think
He
the
doesn't know that.
brashiness he definitely could say comes from what he thinks his father would do. But the go for the throat move quite literally comes from the lion. Go for the jugular is the Lannister move. And so he sees this not as I could use this as a puppet, which is kind of what the rest of the Lannisters would do, I think, at this point in the story. But he sees go for the throat not as like, aha, pin, play cat and mouse. He sees it as I can wipe Ned right off the board.
So, to go back to just quickly to an earlier point of yours, Nick, there, I don't think there was any hesitation in Joffrey of this is him going possibly for mercy and then switching to being his dark side. No, I think that was all just an act of show of being like, oh, I'm going to feint like maybe I'm going to give mercy, but really, no, I'm going to kill him. And then, to Gary's point there, basically, like, I think a lot of it is just kind of like, basically like a little spoiled boy, basically never being told no, who is in a position of power to now kind of do whatever he wants, whatever kind of impulse he has. He's never been told no, you shouldn't do this. He's never quite been fully educated on the rights and the wrongs of politics, and that, you know, you need to be thinking farther out with your chess pieces instead of just playing checkers right here and doing what you can to eliminate everything. So it kind of even utters back to that scene of Joffrey and Cersei having that conversation in King's Landing about, like, what would Joffrey do in this situation, and all of his responses were acting on basic impulse there, not any thought out meticulous plan there. So him basically executing Ned is just kind of a quick gut instinct of, like Nick said, of like, oh, he said mean things about me, I'm going to get rid of him because I can. Nobody can tell everybody could say no to me or don't do this, but I am the king. I can do what I want when I want now. So this is what I want to do.
A narcissist sociopath.
seen the consequences either. Like, at no point in he like lied to the king and like fucking cut the butcher's boy, and there was no consequences for him.
Yeah.
Like, no consequences.
I think he would have done worse if the king hadn't rebuked him, and a light rebuking, really. Cersei's like, "Is that what you would say to your would-be prince?" And he's like, whatever, 7 hells. But I think that now that he's the king, there's no one who's going to tell him what to do. And so, if you want to test someone's character, give them power. It's unchecked. He can do whatever he wants because he's the king. And I think that we're in for a very dark history, a very dark next couple episodes here, trying to see what the world will be like with a king that allows this type of thing to happen.
Precisely.
I have a question for you. So Tyler's comment about he doesn't think there was any hesitation in this. It made me think of a question. I have my own thoughts as to why Joffrey is doing the things he does, like I just talked about, because he just wants to watch the world burn and act on impulse. What do you think his end game is? Do you think he's the type of person that would just murder everyone without end to get his way, or do you think that he has some great aspiration? What do you think he thinks killing Ned will accomplish?
I would say probably his initial base instinct thoughts would be like, if I kill this guy, everybody will fear and kind of respect me, of like, oh, I'm this big bad guy making all of these tough decisions, like making all of these decisions. Like, you don't respect me or you don't fear me, I will have your head or something like that, or I will do what I can to kind of destroy you. So it's just, I don't think there's any forward thinking in his actions. It's just any future, I'd say, planning in his actions. It's just, I'm going to do this right here and right now because this is what I think is best for me right now in this situation.
I think you hit the nail on the head. What is best for me?
I guess a counterpoint to like maybe what would make him that instinctual is going back to like what Rob has been dealing with, both with his own forces and with Tywin, of like, oh, he's just a boy, so green in battle that he pisses grass. Like, that's maybe how Joffrey feels he is as a ruler. Like, he's so green that no one would respect him. Like, so now he has to do something, as you say, brash, to be like, yeah, you question me. This is how I fucking roll. Like I'm the boss, and you can figure your own shit out. Like,
I like those, and I like those responses. It's just so unique to me that he doesn't have that what could be the consequences thought. 20,000 Northmen are riding south because he imprisoned their ward, their liege. What do you think is going to happen if they find out you kill him? He doesn't even think that far ahead. So,
all right, and so we have reached the end of our episode here. Any kind of
his watch has ended.
Any kind of closing comments or thoughts for kind of about this, or anything kind of reflecting back on the first few episodes, first 9 episodes? Nick, we'll kind of start with you. Anything for you?
There's definitely a game to the Game of Thrones, as shown by Ned. Well, yeah, it's true. Like, Ned is, I'm going to play by the rules. I'm going to do everything honorably. I'm going to do what being a good soldier means to me. And he's dead at the end of this run so far. And the people who are playing, quote unquote, the game are still very clearly in power, and the happenstance that their scheming has wrought is that there's this sociopath who's now going to be the most powerful person in the realm. So it will be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Gary.
I think that it really, up to this point, sort of got us to, like, you guys are saying, like, this is a crazy episode. I was like, I think the next episode is going to, not even trying to spoil, just going to set us up for, end of any show. There's a big kind of cliffhanger at the end of the season. Like, so this is just like putting all of the pieces on the chessboards that you can get the lead up to what is, I think, going to be really interesting in the next episode. But starting from the show, like, you get introduced, like, going back to episode 1, like, you get introduced to Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon and the Imp. But did you really foresee that this is where they were going to end up? Like it just just kind of taking out the middle and thinking like, how did we get here, and just how much the story wove.
There's a lot that these characters don't know about each other.
I would kind of say here, just kind of for me, to use a different analogy that I was thinking of when Gary was talking there, of like, this is more of like setting up kindling for the eventual fire that is to kind of come throughout Westeros there. Of how it's kind of like slowly moving pieces now basically into play of like, well, something is going to happen here. There's something that is going to set off this basically kindling of Westeros there basically, and just kind of engulf it in the flame of wars. And as we may come to find out, this might have been the spark that basically starts the war there. This is the Bran Ferdinand's moment that starts the war.
Mm-hmm.
And then 1.2, I'm just going to mention this briefly, and we're going to talk about this more, I think, with our next episode, is just the naiveness of everybody kind of within the world so far that we've kind of been introduced to, like Ned being naive to how things actually work in King's Landing, or how things actually work in the political space there. Sansa being naive to kind of just how...
She's really naive.
How things kind of are, like there's the hidden background to kind of everything going on there too. Just a lot of characters not being kind of fully aware of what's really going on around them.
So
Yeah.
Just that the people who are starting to kind of come to the forefront weren't necessarily around during Robert's Rebellion. So the people who know what war is, are Tywin Lannister, or like the Lannisters have, and then Jaime Lannister was a Kingsguard, so they just have a lot more knowledge of how the last Robert's Rebellion affected the pieces on the board. Whereas like now Robb is leading the North, and Joffrey's the king of the seven, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, but they don't know what actual war looks like.
Yes.
Right.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us here at the GoT Rewatch podcast group here. Next time for our, was it 4th episode? Yes.
4th.
For episode 4, we will be watching episode 10 of season 1, titled Fire and Blood. Fire and Blood.
See? Everything's perfectly fine.
Totally. Non-ominous title or anything like that. Nothing big is going to happen at all. It's really just, everybody's going to hug it out basically here.
Date night.
Date night, yep. All right, well, thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. We will see you next time.
See ya.
See you next time.